Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of Batman Caped Crusader. Great series premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So obviously, it's not really an origin story. This probably would be considered a pseudo year one, because going into this I knew this has been in the works for a little while. It is a spiritual successor, but also once again kind of reimagining of Batman the animated series, so taking a lot of stuff not just from the animated series but also the comics and tweaking it a little bit. So obviously, it's early enough days where Batman is still a rumor amongst criminals and cops. Most people are like, oh, that's just kind of like the boogeyman story. Until, Batman busts up one of Rupert Thorne's functions. Well, his thugs are doing stuff. But then the place explodes, which I was like, interesting. I was like, so we're literally starting off with a bang in that regard. I do think it's interesting. And I don't know if this was... obviously, it's a Batman show, so he's going to be Batman most of the time. But it is a thing of we get a little Bruce Wayne this episode, but it's mainly Batman. So, and once again, it's his show, so it's understandable. But I think it's interesting that even while he's, I guess it's meant to be I'm ready to go whenever I need to. But it just kind of gives me flavors of the Batman, where Bruce was the Batman all the time, because he hadn't really cracked the Bruce Wayne persona yet, because he was Batman all the time. It kind of gives me shades of that. To be fair, my experience with the animated series, I haven't seen it in such a long time. I watched it, I don't think I watched a lot of it, but I saw quite a bit when I was a kid. I thoroughly loved it, enjoyed it, but I don't think I've seen any of the animated series as an adult. It's just, I should have taken time to go back. But either way, so I don't remember if there was really that juxtaposition. Once again, as a cartoon, you want to probably have him Batman most of the time in a 30-minute episode. 22, 24 without commercials, so I get that, but I think it's interesting. And I also feel just a single thing kind of gives you an idea, and maybe I'm reading too much into it. It seemed super on purpose. Was the fact is that Bruce refers to Alfred as he's Pennyworth. I was like, that's interesting. You don't call him Alfred, you call him by his last name. And it was I've never known Bruce to do that. Now, that's just kind of distinguishing you from anyone else. I'm sure there probably have been instances, but I feel that's more of an aspect of their relationship that Bruce keeps it like that. It almost feels like there's supposed to be a barrier there, where it's just kind of yes, Pennyworth rather than Alfred, because it seemed, I don't know. Maybe him and Alfred, yes, Alfred raised him. Who knows? They might have changed stuff for this continuity, but just, I don't know. Him calling him Pennyworth just seems so distant, and not just calling him Alfred, because I'm always used to Bruce being oh, Alfred. So, once again, I could be reading way too much into that, but it feels like that was 100% on purpose. But like I said, that could be setting up the threads to kind of showcase, give you a better understanding of their dynamic and relationship. But to me, that kind of speaks volumes, but we'll see. Some other characters we get introduced to in this, obviously Barbara, which she's a lawyer, which I was interesting. I was do I actually know what Barbara typically does? I actually kind of made me realize, I was I actually don't know what most superheroes do for their secret identities. Obviously, I only know some because of adaptations. Obviously the go-to is Clark Kent working as a reporter. That's kind of a go-to, but most superheroes, I'm actually, prior to more recent adaptations, I had never given thought of, what does Dick Grayson do for a job? And so in Titans, he quit being Robin, so he's, a cop. But to be fair, that's its own thing. But also in that continuity, Barbara, at that time in that continuity, she's in her Oracle era of her story, so she's working with the GCPD. So it's just, it's interesting to think about. So her being a lawyer in this, obviously, because I'm trying to think, because even in Batman Beyond, she does eventually take over for her dad. In that continuity, she was a cop. But I never think about what she does present day. So for her being a cop now, well, not even cop, but being law enforcement, law related, makes sense considering your dad's a cop. So it makes sense. Also, what's his face? Harvey. Harvey seems like such a slime ball in this, and maybe he always typically is, but I feel like Harvey doesn't really become a douche until he becomes Two-Face. But, you know, maybe that's kind of indicative. Once again, maybe I'm misremembering, because like most versions I've seen of Harvey, he seems to be pretty upstanding. He can be bent in some capacities, but for the most part, he seems generally good. But maybe those are the far and few in between versions. Like, maybe he typically is a slime ball, and I just don't remember. I don't remember him pre-Two-Face in the animated series, so I don't remember if he was exactly like that or not. But him being such a slime ball, like, oh, you should make a deal. Oh, how about this? Heads, tail, what was it, like, heads, will make a deal. Tails, he gets 20 years. And it's like, yo, you're betting on a man's life. Once again, maybe Harvey is that slime. I mean, even character model-wise, even, like, the facial motions on the character, I was like, oh, he's meant to invoke slimeball lawyer. And talking about people who are bent, obviously we've gotten to set up that Bullock is bent, which obviously that character can always go back and forth. Sometimes he'll stay bent, but I feel like a lot of versions typically have him being redeemed. So I don't know if they're going to go down that route in this, because I remember him being a hard ass in the original series. I don't remember him being bent, but I remember him being a hard ass. But maybe he was in the beginning and just like was a little bent, but then just straight up became like just a good cop, but he was a hard, like, I don't know if that's, I don't, once again, it's been a hot minute since I've seen the animated series, so I don't remember if that's how he's designed. But once again, most versions I've seen more recently, like, the most recent version I saw would be the version of the character in Gotham, which, yeah, he was crooked in that, he was bent in that, but he eventually became a good cop. You know, so I don't know if Bullock's in that boat this episode. I mean, in this series. I mean, especially, it's not cool when you're evacuating the police station and you leave whoever you were, like, processing handcuffed. To be fair, he's also working with the Penguin, getting, you know, some kickbacks. So, like I said, he's definitely bent in this. We'll see whether he has a story arc of being a good cop or not. I actually did not, speaking of the Penguin, I had no idea they were doing they had gender bent Oswald into Oswalda. I think the first time I heard about it was like super recently. I think they were talking about it a little bit on the most recent episode of Fat Men Beyond. That was the first time I'd ever heard that. Because I've avoided a lot of like material for this, so I don't think it was in the trailer because I skimmed the trailer for a thumbnail for something, but I'm like, I don't think it was in the trailer at all. So, voiced by Minnie Driver, which I was like, oh, I think I went into this knowing that, but still. And I think it's such an interesting thing too, making her like this, obviously like parent, which I was like, huh, has Oswald ever been a parent? Like maybe in the comics and stuff, but I've never seen Oswald play the role. I wonder, is it almost supposed to be like this inverse of Oswald? Because Oswald has his like relationship with his mom. I mean, perfect timing too, considering it's like, well, versions of the Penguin I've seen more recently have leaned into like the whole like, I don't know if mama's boy is what I want to say, but like really, like he cares and loves a lot about his mom. His mom is like the most important lady in his life. So I don't know if it's supposed to be a little bit of like shifting gears a little bit and making it that, rather than being kind of a maybe considered mama's boy, it's kind of mama herself, you know. So I think that was kind of interesting. Also, like, your kids are afraid of you, one of them turns on you, you end up killing the wrong kid. I love the whole like, oh baby, I don't hold a grudge for long, and you just like locked your kid in a box and drowned him. I was like, at first I was like, are you just gonna punish him? But it's like, well, he betrayed you, so now you're gonna straight up kill your kid. And someone correct me, like nearing the end of the episode when Bruce is in his submarine, which let's just kind of be like, no, don't worry about it. It is what it is. You just accept it as it is. We're just deep in this world of like, Bruce has been Batman for a while and he's got all his tech. I'm curious if they even want to cover any of like the Lucius Fox stuff of like, will Lucius have anything to do with his tech or not? You'd assume, but I don't even know if that was a thing when the original animated series came out. He was in the animated series. Once again, I haven't seen it in a long time. Plus, my DC knowledge isn't what it is now versus what it was then. So that's a whole thing. But yeah, so I'd assume like, right, they'll probably touch on the Lucius Fox side of things at some point in time. But anyway, my point for going on that diatribe was like, while he was in the submarine thing, there's all these boxes, and you see one has like a like skeletal dead body. So I was like, oh, I guess that's Oswaldo's main way of dealing with people. It's like lock you in a box and drown you. But I was like, there looked like there was a whole bunch of boxes in that water. So I was like, is that all? We saw at least one body sticking out, but I'm like, are the rest of those boxes people she killed, or what? Or is that just supposed to be indicative of everybody dumps bodies in the water? Like that's the Gotham way of like, hey, you're disposing of a body, you dump it in water. Like I don't know if that was supposed to be an indictment against Oswaldo, or was that supposed to be just an indictment against just criminals in general when it comes to Gotham. But yeah, kind of shifting back to just Oswaldo in general, she does seem to be like the secret criminal. She's not like, it's not a known commodity that she is like this big time criminal. It's like she might be up to something illegal, but nothing would stick. But it seems like mainly like her real life mobster stuff is severely going under the radar to the point like no one knew, because even Bruce and Alfred were commenting on like, oh yeah, we had no idea she was who she was. Like we underestimated her. Which I do love. Like I said, I love that it is a party setting, of course, where we get to see Bruce do his thing. And I love just the whole, like, Alfred being like, have fun, sir. And he's like, was that a joke? He was like, almost kind of like, yes and kind of no. And I love the immediately, like, turn and put on the awkward smile. I was like, has he not really done the Bruce Wayne thing? But not, but he's so charming. And I love that it's like Aaron comes up to him. It's like, oh, this is my mama's party. He's like, oh, well, that's swell for you, Alan. Make sure you put this stuff somewhere else. Like my like take my stuff and put it somewhere. I was like, all right, you're playing up the douchebag rich boy thing. Even with Harvey, he's like, hey Harvey, we're at a party. The biggest problem is we're here and neither one of us has a drink yet. So it's like he's really, obviously he's already leaned into and set up the playboy persona. I love when he came out of the water and Barbara didn't really ask any questions, because he said like, right, it wouldn't be a yacht party if someone didn't fall into the water. And she's like, excuse me. And I love that some ladies come over like, oh my God, Bruce, what happened? So he's like, it wouldn't be a yacht party if someone didn't fall overboard. I love that so much because they laugh at it. Because he almost looked annoyed that she didn't find it funny. He was like, I guess he's like, oh, the Playboy charm usually works on people. Oh, I guess not. I find that so funny that he said the exact same joke, but it's like they actually laughed at it, found it funny. It's like, okay, showcasing your Playboy charm does not work on Barbara. I think that's fascinating. It feels like they might set up, not might, it's definitely going to be a thing in this. I don't know if it typically is. That Barbara's definitely going to be more pro Batman than she is Bruce Wayne. So, I mean, and that's by design, I'm sure. So, I also wasn't expecting Barbara to come strapped when she was protecting the other son, and like pulled out the revolver. I was like, hey yo, I wasn't expecting you leaning out the car shooting back at people shooting you. It wasn't, but I think sometimes I underestimate like how hardcore Barbara Gordon can be sometimes. I also love when Bruce helped her as Batman and like didn't like hit the guys with the car and then kept it moving. I also appreciate the design because it's like it's like the animated series, but it's even sleeker. I mean, once again, it's been a hot minute, so I mean, the original animated series had that very slickness to it as well, but it feels like even more slick to me, but maybe that's my imagination. But I appreciate that he didn't even get out the car. It's just I hit him with the car, gave Barbara the nod, she nodded back, and I took off. I do feel somewhat bad for her only remaining son, who was like, yeah, I betrayed Mama. He's like, I shouldn't have worked with Rupert Thorne, but he's like, but Mama, she was mean and this and that. Like I said, it just seems like they gave a lot of like, I don't know. It just like I said, it just feels so interesting. Like I said, I think it's supposed to be like a switch on the typical like Oswald's relationship with his mom, and kind of gave it so it's like, oh, like her kids' relationships with her, like so. I'm curious, are we going to get any more with like her one remaining son? We've been dealing with like, and obviously more recent adaptations, excluding animated stuff, but more on the live action front. We've been dealing with more grounded Batman and Gotham to some extent, for the most part, in a lot of ways. So it's neat to kind of go back to like the absurd shit, like Oswaldo's like little like umbrella that's on top of like the iceberg, which making the iceberg a ship in this is kind of interesting rather than like it being a place in the city for it just to be a boat out in the water. Makes a lot of sense. I was like, oh, that's neat. I wonder, has that ever been done before? Maybe it has in other versions, but mostly I know it is like a soiree type of place in the city. So it just being an actual boat and the whole penguin of it all, just I thought that was kind of neat decision. Like I said, if that hasn't already been done before, this is my first time, at least to my recollection, ever seeing that really showcased. So I thought that was neat. But either way, the whole like cartoony like, oh, like this is comics, let's get crazy, let's get absurd, is the whole like freaking umbrella on top of the boat is secretly a missile launcher. So it literally ends with like the police department getting blown up. I was like, that's a hell of a way to start the series. It's like, yeah, and the GCPD headquarters got blown to smithereens. Luckily, no one was on the inside, but still. Once again, kind of leaning into like this Bruce is still very fresh at this whole Batman thing, because for one, he messed up to the point that the GCPD got exploded. It's like you could have like that could have ended badly if they didn't already have the heads up from Oswaldo's like son, because it's like a lot of people could have died in that moment. So you screwed up there. You took down Oswald, but doing so, you just got rid of like. I mean, that's always the struggle with this crime stuff. It's like, yeah, you remove one person, you give another person opportunity to come in to fill that void. Because it's like, yeah, Oswaldo was the only thing keeping Rupert Thorne in check, and now that she's been removed from the board, it means that he can swoop in and take whatever territory she was already, like, had control of. So, and for Bruce, he's beating himself up about it because he's like, I failed and it cannot happen again, you know? So kind of already starting as a little bit of a slight victory, but in his eyes more of a loss, because it's like, I should have seen this coming. I should have been prepared for it, because it's like these two butting heads, Oswaldo going after Thorne, kind of kept him on his back foot and kept him in check, and now like his main competitor is kind of off the board now, so giving him free reign, kind of what he was hoping for anyway. I mean, he already had insider information, so it's not like, but I'm sure in Bruce's mind, it's like, I've tipped the scales more in his favor, and I've got to like nip this whole thing in the bud, because they haven't been able to catch Thorne on anything. To be fair, they weren't able to catch Penguin on anything until now, because she decided, right, no more subtlety, let's make a bang. So I can definitely see Bruce going forward, trying to compensate for, obviously leaning into his philanthropic angle of things, but also to feel, to make up for his mistake as Batman. I could definitely see him as Bruce Wayne paying to have the GCPD rebuilt and stuff like that. I don't know if I mean, once again, it depends on where he is in his era of Bruce Wayne. Like, yes, he's got the Playboy thing down, but will he do the whole, like, oh, I actually use my money to help Gotham? Has he gotten to that point in his story yet? Has he come to realize the benefit of stuff that he can only do? There's the stuff he can only do as Batman, and then there's the stuff he can only do as Bruce Wayne. Once again, just because it's the most recent adaptation, would be like the Batman. Bruce hadn't really gotten to that point in his story in the Batman, with the whole what good he could do as Bruce Wayne. So I'm curious about this version. Obviously, I also didn't take the time to talk about any of like the voice cast. Like, I mean, other than Minnie Driver, obviously, some of the names I'm familiar with is Bruce/Batman himself, Hamish Linklater. I'd only found out more like probably like the past month or two that he was voicing Batman. I was like, oh, that's dope. I saw Gary Anthony Williams' name, John DiMaggio. You can't have something without John slipping in there at some point. It's fucking John DiMaggio, dude. What's Cedric's last name? I mean, not Cedric, it's Cedric. Cedric, is it Yarborough? Probably like best known for like Hawaii Reno 911 and God, what's its face? I've never seen it, but the Goldbergs. I haven't seen Reno 911 either, but I know that's like one of the earliest things I associate him with. But because he voiced Rupert Thorne, so I'm going to be hearing from him more going forward. So, because there was also something I was curious about the structure of the show. Really quickly, I was curious about the overarching, like, I figured there'd be an overarching story, sure, but because a lot of the animated series, to my recollection, was very much like, oh, this is episode by episode type of thing. And this feels like it will have that episodical angle to it, but there is an overarching story. I'm sure there was for the animated series, or there might be overarching arcs of like, oh, this couple episodes might have been an arc, this and that. Once again, I was young at the time, so story structuring probably definitely didn't matter to me, and I didn't really care. And I didn't, like I said, I watched quite a bit, but not a lot in all of the original animated series, so I don't quite know its story structuring, but to my recollection, it felt like very episodical. But like I said, that could be my misunderstanding. So anyway, like I said, I think it's kind of a great start to to this series. Obviously, more animated Batman. It's never a bad thing, and obviously the very obviously you feel the backbone of the animated series in it, even though I don't remember everything about it, but I remember the feel and vibe, and you got all of that. Obviously they leaned more into the actual making it kind of the very 40s aesthetic, whereas it was kind of like a blend of modern day and 40s aesthetic. In the original series, they are just straight up leaning into the 40s side even more. I don't know if it's actually supposed to actually be 40s, but it's supposed to capture that 40s detective noir type of vibe. So I'm here for it. I'm very excited to continue this and see where the rest of the season takes us, but in particular where the next episode takes us with all of this. I saw bits of the trailer, like I said, getting a thumbnail, but I don't know all the villains we see. I do like the silhouetted picture for this episode, for the show, where you have Batman in the center, and on both sides it's kind of his rogues gallery. You see silhouettes. So it's gonna be interesting to get a full picture of all the villains that Bruce deals with, and obviously how that intertwines with the overarching story. What role everyone plays. Like I said, some people are very similar to who they typically are, while other people have been tweaked and changed a little. And it's going to be interesting to see what those tweaks and changes are in their full capacity. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.